instilling values and character into our youth through religious programs and through youth programs. It's a town that on any given Saturday or any given night during the winter, you can see the schools lit up and our youth participating in programs. On Saturdays, you can ride around town, you can see youth football programs, cheerleading programs, soccer programs, softball and baseball programs. So we're a unique community in that aspect. But is it enough? We would hope it is enough, but I fear that sometimes those kinds of activities may not be quite enough when you consider what the youth are facing with the level of violence in the media, with the level of violence and availability of clear directions, unscrupulous people out there trying to steal the minds and souls of these kids through drugs or through these unmonitored chat rooms that they can fall prey to on the internet. I had an experience with a woman that I met. Her son, she had two twin boys, and one of her twins became involved in a chat room, and in that chat room, he was in there discussing some of his social needs, and the people who were responding to him were professionals. They knew exactly how to meet those social needs of that child, filling in the gaps that he was lacking in his life. And they hooked him into a white supremacist group. And he began, there was a very obvious demeanor, change in his demeanor and his character. And he took on all the trappings of a skinhead group, and he began to recruit others in his community, in his school, to follow his lead. And what saved him was his brother. His brother was aware of that change in his brother. It sort of slipped by the parents. They thought it was just a casual change. They were busy surviving, providing for the family. So this youth began to slip further and further into turmoil and hate, and he was saved by his brother. They actually did an intervention with a professional counseling group that worked with cults years ago, capturing young people who had fallen prey to cults, and they debriefed debriefed that child, and they're still fearful, but there is positive hope that they may have intervened early enough to save his life. So it shows you the kind of traps that are out there for our youth and what our parents and what our schools are confronting in the future. And specifically, what are we doing at the police department? The North Reading Police Department is in a partnership with our schools, and all our planning around these issues it is done in partnership with the schools. But presently, we are not only on the Zero Tolerance Committee, but we're also a founding member of the Northeast Massachusetts Law Enforcement Council. And that's a collaborative effort of 33 communities in northeastern Massachusetts that was founded in 1969. As a founding member, we've been selected as one of the 8 pilot communities that are going to participate in the NIMLAC organization's STARS program. And that's School Threat Analysis Response System. In this system, North Reading is going to receive an initial grant where they'll be able to take, for example, the school plans. And we're going to digitize all the school plans in North Reading so that we have ready access, computerized plans that we can provide to the rapid deployment police response that will respond in time of a crisis, versus in Columbine where the police were grabbing students as they were coming out of the school and asking them to sit down on the back of books, writing the floor plan of the school so that the police could properly respond and enter that building and not be lost. So we're thinking about those small details. We're developing teams that will respond to minor crisis, that will be in a supportive role to schools. These teams will also train the local police departments on how to rapidly deploy to a school in a time of a crisis. For example, in Columbine, police officers were showing up at that particular unfortunate event, and it was an uncoordinated effort for probably 1 hour, where individual groups of police officers tried to gain entry into the building. It was uncoordinated, it was lack of communications, and the problems were obvious. We're trying to prevent that by having the local police department practice the same protocol that the regional response unit will practice, so that everybody is working on the same page of music. So it's a coordinated effort, and you get the most effective and efficient response. Beyond that, they're looking at preventive initiatives also to work with schools on the preventive end. What can we do to help alleviate some of the problems? And that's already taking place in North Reading. North Reading is ahead of the game in many aspects. They've done a review, for example, of their existing policies, and that review showed that there are a lot of pieces in place already to respond to any number of crises in the school. It was enlightening for me to see that, and I think it was nice that the Zero Tolerance Committee and the school committee, I said, listen, we're surprised that these things are already there, and that they may be in need of a little bit of tweaking, but the foundation is there to handle any type of crisis in our schools. As far as the police department is concerned, we're also looking at training our day officers and night officers to be able to rapidly deploy to the school, or actually any of the schools in the community in a time of crisis. We're looking at a communication system. Is it adequate? Will it meet the needs of communicating with that larger organization that we also belong to? We're also looking at getting a rapid deployment vehicle. And that seems like it may be an extravagance, but it's in a practical sense, we're looking at taking the old fire department's ambulance that is out of service and being ready for sale. And in that, we could prepare all the equipment and the school maps, the floor plans of the school, of any of the large businesses in the community that are likely to be targets of violence. And so the officer would respond to the scene with that particular vehicle. And it just saves a number of steps in that rapid deployment. So there was a lot of things going on in the community that actually started long before Columbine, as Ron and Dr. Troughton talked about. So we've been concerned about some of the issues. Our pulse is on the needs of the community, and there is a strong partnership between the schools and the police that are working cooperatively towards providing that goal in the school's mission of creating that safe environment, and I'm proud to be part of that. Thank you.
Well, they had a lot to say, didn't they? Do we have questions that we'd like to share? Would you please direct it to somebody specific?
Sure. This is for Lieutenant Nolan. How can a parent find out if another family has guns in their house? Is there some way to find out? I mean, this is an issue that has come up a number of times, and I know there's a privacy issue, but how can a parent be assured that when their child goes to someone's house that there might not be guns that are not secured in that home?
Unfortunately, we're living in a society that pays a price for democracy, and one of those prices we pay is confidentiality. And a lot of the information that our schools get, a lot of the information that the police get, are governed by law. And we are not privileged to share that information. In fact, there was a law on the books most recently, the sex offender law, in which we were allowed by statute to report certain levels of sex offenses to the community. But recently that's been overturned by the appellate court. So Massachusetts is not only a great state to live in, but it's one of the most conservative states as far as law enforcement goes. And the courts really focus on honoring the confidentiality which is guaranteed by the constitutions of the Massachusetts and the United States. So the best thing to do is ask the question. I wouldn't hesitate. If my kids were young enough today, years ago I wasn't even conscious or cognizant of those kind of concerns. But parents today, I would ask the question, is there firearms in the house? If there are, how are they secured? And base your judgment upon that. If there's no cooperation from that parent, I'd tell my child, I don't want you in the house.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Any other questions?
I just add to that? I think that's a great suggestion. And it's amazing how many people are afraid to bring up the topic of guns. Parents who would never hesitate to ask if there's going to be adult supervision at an activity, or if alcohol is going to be available to young people, somehow feel they're invading someone's privacy by even asking about firearms. And you have to normalize the issue of guns. More than half households in the United States do have a gun in them. And just asking the question sort of makes it something that other people can talk about. And there's a wonderful organization called Stop Handgun Violence based here in Massachusetts, which has some materials to help you sort of role play getting through that process. And I have a resource list of violence prevention organizations out on the info table, and they're listed on that. Thank you.
Yes?
This is for Sandra. The peer mediation conflict groups that you train, how young do you start training? Is it in the elementary grades?
We don't have any programs in elementary grades. We have middle school programs, primarily the high school programs. But a lot of people say, why not start the kids young? They probably wouldn't start with a full-blown mediation program per se, but some form of conflict resolution could be introduced at an elementary school level. It's been talked about a lot. It's been done in some schools, but we haven't done that yet.
I'd like to add to that, just excuse me, don't you want to say something? There are programs that are available to elementary schools, like Kids and Company runs violence prevention, mediation, conflict resolution, sexual assault prevention program. There's other curriculums like the CAP program, which is an acronym for Child Assault Prevention Project. There's several of them out there that are available to elementary schools. Pardon me, I didn't hear you, Julie.
The 5th grade and up in elementary schools do conflict resolution programs.
Did you hear that? In the 5th grades in North Reading, they do conflict resolution.
I was just going to add, one of the handouts on the information table is entitled Safe Schools. And there is a description of the program that I mentioned, the Social Competency Reach Out to Schools program, that right now we're in the process of just beginning to phase in at one of our elementary schools. It requires fairly extensive training for staff and counselors, but it's not a pure peer mediation program, but helps students to really react interpersonally. So you may want to take a look at that as another resource.
I have a question regarding safe places for kids to go. There's an awful lot of wonderful activities in North Reading through the schools and after school, and there's wonderful activities, for instance, through the churches for youth. But I have a concern about the seemingly lack of a central place, an indoor place for kids across religious and different ages, but particularly adolescents to gather. And I know that there's, I think I have 3 children myself, and it's quite a concern for my middle child, where they can gather and where they can't. And now there's been a wonderful new initiative in town to discourage kids, and I would say they're mainly teenagers, from gathering at businesses. But I think it also leads to confusion about where they are welcome and where they can sit, for example, when they're in between rollerblading and that kind of thing. And I'm just wondering what kind of suggestions the panel might have about how we, has this been looked at? What's the best way to possibly study this, and as a community possibly make recommendations of how we could address that need?
As I mentioned earlier, I've been a resident of North Reading for over 45 years, and I recollect back in the 1970s, early 1970s, there was a youth center in North Reading. It was housed in the third meeting house on the Common, and that seemed to have worked well for several years. It was chaperoned by young adults. The activity level was respectable. There were games and other activities that were taking place in that social setting. However, there was some adult supervision, though it was minimal. But what happened over time was our adult community lost interest in that youth center, and as the